Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Doug Show. My name's Doug Cunnington, and today we have a WordPress hosting expert, Dustin Hyle. And we're going to get into some details, how he ended up starting a hosting company, and some more interesting things like, well, I don't want to step on your story, but we're going to talk about things that you can really use, like site speed and how to improve your site speed, how to stay up to date with WordPress and learn some of the resources that Dustin uses. And Dustin, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I didn't mean to discount your story. I know you have an awesome story, and I'm curious. We actually don't know each other that well, so this will be new for me also. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe before you started the hosting company, and then we'll sort of back into how you ended up doing the work that you do these days.
Sure. So I've had a career in IT, and while going through, IT and the corporate life of that, I was interested in, side hustles, niche sites, things like that. So I started using WordPress in 2007, and the original desire to be in WordPress was for those type of website side hustles or whatever. Um, and then over time, I was always asked technical questions, and so being from an IT background, I kind of leaned into the support stuff. And so when someone asked, "Oh, this is broken. How's this happen?" I would kind of lean into that. And so I started doing that. I started building sites for people as well. But then I found that I wasn't really into that. Waiting for people to send over their new logo and changing colors 50 times and things like that just didn't interest me. So before the hosting, I actually started it as a WordPress help service. And then after doing that for a while, one of my clients was a person that did SEO audits, and she was affiliate for a lot of the different hosting companies out there. And so one day when we were on a call talking about something else, she mentions how irritated she was with the current host she was promoting. And I just sat there and basically took notes on all the things she was complaining on. And I was like, you know what? I manage servers in my day job for a living. I can start a hosting company that doesn't do any of these things. And so that's actually how the hosting company started.
Okay. And how many years were you doing like corporate IT stuff?
I've been doing corporate IT stuff for like 20 years now.
Okay, gotcha. And are you still doing it like full time?
I am an IT manager currently, and I run the hosting and service company on the side.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Great. That's an awesome, side hustle. Like once you kind of get the moving pieces in place, then it's kind of, I guess, fairly manageable. So how much time are you spending on the hosting company these days?
It's growing more and more. Lately, it's actually getting to the point of being maybe unmanageable. So we're looking at hiring. I took a recent investment as well, and so the company is getting ready to just kind of skyrocket, getting the pieces in place.
Okay, super cool. And then what year was it when you, I guess, had that conversation with a client and you were like, I'm going to start a hosting company?
Yeah, so that was just under 2 years ago that we started the hosting company.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah, and starting the hosting company actually has grown the services business more. So the services business is actually slightly bigger than the hosting, but it was hard for kind of being an entry product of the services because it has generally a higher consulting fee, but the hosting is kind of like a foot in the door now. And so people come to me for hosting and then realize that I have the other services, and that's what's really growing right now.
And what are those other services?
So we have a monthly service plan that's kind of like a IT department for your website. So you can just focus on creating content. We do daily offsite backups, weekly updates for all the plugins, WordPress itself, themes, etc. And then if any like small fixes come in, like Google Analytics 4 is a big one right now. Customers are saying, hey, I need to update my code on my site for Google Analytics. And they just send me an email and I take care of it for them.
Okay, gotcha. So then they just don't have to get in the weeds so much. And I'm sure you have some specific surface plan and SLA and all that kind of stuff. Cool.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So did you know how to do the marketing portion when you were like, hey, I'll start a hosting company? I think, it sounds like you have an IT background like me. So we didn't really know how to do marketing stuff. We're like, we could put the racks together and like do the architecture or whatever. But we probably, or I underestimated like what it is to do marketing. And actually, all the IT guys are like making fun of the marketing and salespeople often, right? I don't know if you did that at your place. And then I know the salespeople make fun of us too. So anyway,
absolutely.
Did you know anything about like what it takes to market a product online?
So as learning all the WordPress stuff and the site things, that kind of blends in with the marketing a little bit. So I know like a general basis of marketing, but I'm not a person who likes to put myself out there generally. This whole podcasting thing, for example, is very recent that I've come to be okay with that. So, anyways, the main growth was the original person that I talked with at BlogAid, who she started referring all of her customers, and then word of mouth from those people brought in other affiliates. So almost all the growth to this point has been affiliates. And then just in December, I decided to start using Twitter for marketing for the site too. And that's been growing really good. I'm just trying to be the most helpful person in WordPress on Twitter right now. And so I'll post threads about how to use Google Search Console or how to set up Google Analytics without a plugin. I'll just do threads like that, and then I'll get filled with DMs. People like, "Oh, can you help me with my site?" And it's been going pretty good.
Okay. And I guess, seen a resurgence, especially in our space, for people using Twitter generally. I guess we hear case studies where people are like, I launched my book and ended up on like the bestseller list because I just was on Twitter for a couple of years and really like focused on it, or like built my business. So it sounds like you would not have just gravitated there unless it was for a specific marketing purpose. Do you have a game plan where you're trying to do like a certain number of posts per week or per day, graphics, like other strategies like that? Just kind of curious at a high level.
Yeah, so I actually heard a podcast of a web designer that said that they were getting a lot of their design clients from Twitter, and like that was the most in 2022. That was like their biggest inbound source, and so I was like, oh well, that's not the same as what I'm doing, but similar kind of clientele generally. So then I was like, was going to try that. And as far as the game plan, I just try to post at least once a day, if not more. And then I look for people that are, asking questions related to WordPress or hosting or email deliverability, things like that. And then just, answering in the comments is trying to be the most helpful person in WordPress. And so that's game plan. So far, it's going good.
Do you have a strategy for time management? So I know if you're doing a good job, you're going to get a lot of those inbound questions, and it could be, I don't know, for me, I would want to throw my phone out the window from all the notifications. Not everyone reacts that way. fortunately. So do you manage it though? So you're like, okay, from this hour to this hour, I'll answer all the questions and then I'll put the phone away or turn off notifications for a little while. What do you do?
Yeah, so generally I have, I still have my day job, and then I also have all the clients for the hosting and the services. And so generally between those projects, I'll just pull up my phone, look at notifications real quick, answer a couple questions like in between, put the phone away, do the project, and then after that project's done, like while I'm in the mindset of having to switch to a different project, I go quickly take a little Twitter break for a few minutes and then go to the next project.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, any other specific challenges in starting the hosting company before we hit some of the more specific questions here on WordPress and site speed?
The biggest challenge is I focus on speed and security with the hosting. And the security is an interesting one because a lot of hosts have turned off a lot of the hosting type software that runs on the server. It comes with a lot of security plugins and things. And a lot of the hosts have turned them off because it has false positives. So like in WordPress with Gutenberg, when you go to update a post, if you have like an ad, a script in there for an ad, it might trigger the security because it's seeing that WordPress is trying to pull in something from another source that's other than your site. And so it will, block the person out. And so I get support tickets where people are like, I can't update my site. It's it's a security problem or whatever. Well, a lot of hosts have just went as a result to that to not have those tickets. They just turn everything off. And so my biggest hurdle has been I'm trying to draw a line in the sand and not turn it off for everyone. I work with the client to figure out what the false positive was and maybe make a tweak to the policy or that. And that was kind of something that I didn't realize was going to be nearly as big of an issue as it has been. And I can understand why other hosts would turn it off, but I don't want to do that because I do see, sites every single day that are getting hacked, and it's growing. And with everything that has automation, now bad actors don't have to have a really big background to figure it out. They can just go on the internet and search, or maybe even ask ChatGPT, how do I write a script that does this? And so now you have even more bad actors that are actually a problem now. So
interesting. Okay. Well, that's a good segue. Let's talk about security. So what are some of the, biggest security mistakes that people make, and how can we stay ahead of them?
So if the hosting has mod security, if mod security is turned off full time, that's a problem. Installing quote unquote security plugins and thinking that will just like cover it. And so like you don't have to use any of the other best practices. You're like, oh, I got a security plugin, so I'm safe. I've heard that many times from people. One of the best things you can do that's easy and free is putting your site behind Cloudflare. Cloudflare is an additional firewall in front of your site, and they have a lot of technology that can see a problem hitting one of the sites behind Cloudflare, and then like making a rule based on what they saw on CNN.com or whatever. But that same rule is now protecting your site too. And all that's available for free.
Okay. And quick note, did you say mod serve or something like that?
Mod security.
Okay. What is that for people that don't know?
Sure. So any web host or web server that is running Apache or Lightspeed can have this add-on to Lightspeed and Apache that's called mod security. And it has like a bunch of rules based on like different behaviors. It's kind of like having the antivirus on your computer. If it sees a file that looks a certain way, it blocks it. The same thing, but for the server.
And so if people don't know what it is that like active already? Is there some action we need to take? Do we tell the hosting company, hey, is this implemented?
Yeah, so if it's a cPanel based hosting, so like if you go and you log into a cPanel, that generally has it where you as the user can go into cPanel and you can see the settings for mod security and turn it on or off there. If you do have cPanel and you don't see it, you might want to ask your host, like, hey, do you guys actually have this? Or, did they turn it off and then just remove the link from cPanel? Things like that.
Okay. And I'm sure it varies, but I'll ask anyway. Is it typically turned on? Is it typically turned off with nothing set up, or what is the default typically?
The default is on for sure. But like I said, some of the hosting companies do turn it off, because they've got flooded with support requests or things like that. So.
Okay, got it. And then the next one is Cloudflare, since it acts as a firewall. Perfect. Anything else?
Those are the two biggest things. And then as a new addition on the Cloudflare side, they also have this thing called Turnstile. And it's technically in beta, but it's available to all Cloudflare users. And it's kind of like a reCAPTCHA. Like, you go to fill out a form and you get the pop-up and try to click on the fire hydrants or the buses, things like that. Mm-hmm. So Turnstile is like that, except for it's not annoying. It doesn't have any user interaction other than potentially clicking a I'm not a robot type of button. But it does a lot of things in the back end and leverages Cloudflare security to validate if it's a real person. And there's a plugin called Simple Turnstile that links up to Cloudflare's Turnstile and allows you to have that for all of your like comment forms, your login, WordPress login page. So you can, if you have it like on your login page, it's going to keep a bot from sitting there and trying to spam passwords and just try to guess and get in, because it's just going to block them from getting to that login. And okay. It really cuts down on people's comment spam too.
Okay, great. And one thing I like to do, actually, I'll give you two, and then you can tell me if it's good practice. So for several years, I've been using a plugin that changes the default login screen for WordPress. It changes the URL so that someone can't find the login, so they can't brute force it. So is that a pretty good one?
It's not generally like it will get maybe the lowest level of attackers, but the good ones are going to be able to find it anyway. So doing something like the Turnstile is a better option, where it's just going to literally block those bots from the form.
Okay. How do they find it if it's like some random characters?
So you can just, they make like scripts that will just try like everything. Okay. And a robot will just sit there and just keep trying different things. If potentially something in your database gets leaked where they can access the database, then they can see the URL and things like that.
Okay. And I'm thinking still, if it's like a, random, I don't do it exactly like this, but if you treat it like a password where it's like 16 characters, uppercase, lowercase, symbols, like it's going to take a pretty long time to brute force that one. But okay. Yeah. The other sort of security, which is kind of just like the fail safe, or at least in my head, is there's vulnerabilities. Something could get hacked even if you do everything right, and offsite backup. So at least if you catch it, you can revert back. So that's kind of like the thing in my back pocket that makes me feel comfortable, even if I know I'm not doing everything right. So is that good or bad?
100%. Offsite backup is the biggest thing that I push for everyone, because not only for your site security, but even the host. Like, you have issues where a host server gets infected and you need to quickly switch to a different host, or a host data center catches on fire or something. Like, a couple of years ago, there was a very big data center that affected many hosting companies, that they were all like leasing space out of it. Many people lost their sites down for a few days until the host could like recover things. Where, as a site owner, if you have a backup stored in like Amazon S3 or Google Drive or something like that, you could restore it yourself to a new hosting provider within, an hour or two maybe. Whereas, a hosting provider that might have thousands of sites that they got to recover, you might not be at the top of the totem pole, so.
Okay. And yeah, I've experienced that with, a hosting company. I don't know. I can't remember. It was not a physical failure, but it was like a dumb mistake. Like, they admitted it. It was like an admin accidentally like put in the wrong command and like trashed a couple racks. And so it was like thousands of sites, and they had backups, that offsite backups, which was cool. I already had an offsite backup, but they had a way to restore it. However, they did not account for the bandwidth needed. So it took like 4 days. So they were like, we're doing it, but it's going to take a little while. And I stuck with them because, after they made that mistake, they're never going to make that mistake again.
Right.
Luckily. So, okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Scary. Yeah. Everything's fine until it's not. And then there's not much you could do afterwards. So, okay. Yeah. So let's move to WordPress stuff. So what are common mistakes that you see people making with WordPress? And again, how can we avoid those?
The biggest thing, the most common thing I see is sites loading up on plugins. So plugins aren't inherently bad, but there are, every plugin you add to your site is another security potential risk, because the plugin owner might get their site hacked, and you download the latest update for whatever plugin, you install it, and then now it's on your site. So the least number of plugins, the smaller your attack surface is, right? So there's that. And then if a plugin, is bloated or whatever, it could slow down your site. It could have also third-party calls out to other services, and like that service, like, let's just say that it uses like Gravatar or something to like pull in like user images, and so the plugin is doing that. Well, what happens when one of those Gravatar images gets replaced with an ad code that's like loading another site as a pop-up? So your website goes out and pulls in that image, but it's really a piece of code, and now all of a sudden you got a pop-up loading on your site that you didn't put there. So plugins is the biggest thing for security, and it's also generally the biggest thing for speed outside of images. So the best thing you can do is, really think if you actually need the functionality that plugin is adding. Not just add the plugin because someone said, hey, this is a great plugin. Well, even if it's a great plugin, if you don't really need that functionality, it's not worth the trade-off of, it being an attack surface for someone, or it going out of date, or it causing other, even just like bad interactions with other plugins. It's like the plugin vendor might test their plugin and say their plugin's fine, but a piece of their plugin might interact with another plugin. Like recently, Elementor, which is a really popular page builder, it's been having some issues since PHP 8, and it's not Elementor itself, but it's just a weird interaction with some other plugins. So it's not affecting everyone, but it affects people that have, a couple different plugins and also have Elementor. So you get just, weird things. So the more you can limit the plugins, the better.
That's exactly what I did when I first started using WordPress, because you don't know it until you put too many plugins and then you realize like everything's going really slow. For people that think they need a lot of plugins and they have some that they really, they say they really like, how do you coach them to trim it down? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is kind of figuring out what their needs are and what they think they're getting from that plugin. Because even a lot of times I find that many plugins, the functionality that they need might be one line of code in a functions file. So you just can add that one line of code to your function file and then not need the whole plugin. So that's a thing. So to discuss it, with most of my clients that I run into this with, I have a conversation with them, and I'm like, hey, so what are you using this plugin for? And sometimes they're like, oh, I don't even know what I'm using this plugin for, and so we can just get rid of it. Other times they're like, oh, well, it makes the sidebar link flash, or just some weird effect. And so we were like, okay, do we really need that? And then if it turns out yes, then we say, okay, is that function, are we using the best plugin for that? And if we are using the best or aren't using the best plugin, is there another plugin that does the same thing, but from a more reputable vendor that puts out updates frequently? Or is it something that can be replaced with just a little snippet of code?
Okay, great. And I ran into this once where someone I was coaching, I think they had a few plugins that came with their WordPress theme. So they didn't know what they did, but we didn't know if they were used. We didn't know if they were critical to the site. Is there a way to test to see what a plugin does if you don't know what it does and the documentation isn't very good?
Yeah, so what we usually do in that scenario is we'll spin up a staging site. So that's like just a clone of the real website, but it's not the same domain as everyone's actually going to. And then on the staging site, we'll just turn off the plugin and see. We'll do a quick overview of all the different pages or types of pages, and just see if anything broke.
Okay, so you just gotta check it out and see what happens, but do it on a staging site, not a real life production.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we've talked a little about site speed, and I guess in a general sense, I'll let you talk about why site speed is so important. And if there's stuff that you haven't mentioned or that you want to emphasize about site speed, we can get into that, because you already mentioned image size and number of plugins, but I know those are really critical, so we could really underscore it. But yeah, why is site speed so important?
So site speed is important. Google, came out a couple years ago and made a big deal of Core Web Vitals. Well, it turns out that wasn't necessarily a thing. That was a little bit of a scare tactic, because there's still sites that don't load fast that still ranked just fine. But it is a kind of secondary metric where if you have two sites that have equal authority, and Google's looking for a tiebreaker, they're probably going to look to the faster site. But what it also can happen is, what I've seen is Google uses a lot of user metrics, so users' behavior, like how long they stay on the page, if they're going to multiple pages on your site, those type of metrics. Well, if something's taking forever to load, people are generally not patient, and so that's going to affect the metrics, on the user metrics. So even if speed isn't necessarily the direct cause, it could also affect your rankings based on user metrics. Someone not waiting for the page to load and just clicks back.
Hmm. Okay, great. And I know one one of the ways that I've heard to test, which is pretty good, because if you're, at your own house, fast internet connection, everything's fine. But to, load your site
Right.
when you're on your phone, mobile, maybe the best thing is like when I'm inside a store and I don't have a strong signal, just to see how it loads in
Yeah.
like a very poor condition. And
Right.
then you get a really good idea of like a real life situation versus like best case scenario. So, all right. So what are some things we could do to help our site speed?
So the biggest thing that I see, and probably like 75% of people, they're loading images that are way too big for where they're being displayed. So, most people have sites where the layout of the theme, the image might only be like 800 or 1,000 pixels wide, or even on a smaller side with a sidebar, it might only be like 600 pixels wide. So, if someone just takes a picture with their iPhone or whatever, that might be 4,000 pixels wide. So that's going to have an image that the browser is going to shrink visually so it looks smaller, but the file size is going to be that really big file size. So the best thing you can do there is to optimize the image and resize it before you load it on your site. And so what I recommend for that is there's a free tool, and it's at squish.app. That's SQUOOSH.app instead of .com. And that's a free image optimizer. It does compression and also resizing. As far as compression goes, I like to pick the Moz JPEG option because it gets it just as small as WebP usually, but it also works on every browser, whereas WebP is still not fully supported on every browser, for example. And then as far as the resizing goes, I say generally 1,200 pixels or less. And 1,200 pixels is still kind of big for most sites. However, if your site is in an industry where Google Discover is important, Google Discover wants 1,200 pixel wide images. So if it's going to be like your main featured image, 1,200 pixels wide, and then if it's going to be like an image that goes on the sidebar, it's never going to be, bigger than 400 pixels, then obviously resize it down to the 400 pixels instead.
Okay. And then is there a rule of thumb for the file size as well?
So I generally like to see them like under like 150 kilobits per. But when you do the resize on Squish, you're going to pretty much get under that as long as you're under 1,200 pixels wide.
Okay. Great. Yeah, this one of the big things, and like once you go through the exercise, you're like, oh wow, that's a very big difference. What about the tools that resize after you upload to WordPress? What do you think of those?
So it's generally better to do it before. There are plugins like Magify and ShortPixel. They are kind of an 80% option. And why I say that is because they have two things. One, they might over optimize the image. If you have some images that are already optimized on the site and then it goes and re-optimizes, it might make them look not as good, like blurry or something like that. So sometimes you get those over optimizations. And then also by default, most of them have where it stores a copy of the original. Well, that has a problem of it's filling up your hard drive space on your hosting. And so you might be paying a much bigger hosting bill just to hold over those images. So if you are going to use one of those plugins, make sure that you turn off the option to store the original. Or alternatively, you can keep the original just in case you run into an over optimization situation and you need the original back. but then go in and make sure you go to the folder. Like, for example, Short Pixel, I know, makes a folder in your WP content called Short Pixel Backups. And then just delete that once you know you're good to go. So what I do for clients that have uploaded a ton of images already, generally we go and run one of those plugins just to get the back catalog. And then we remove the plugin, and then going forward, we use Squish and have them, do it ahead of time. Also, we'll manually go back even on the ones that we ran the plugin to get the back catalog of, for the old blog posts. We will go and manually do like things like the logo and any images in the sidebar or footer that load everywhere, because you want to make sure that those look, good to go. Whereas, a blog post from 5 years ago, it might not matter as much.
Okay. One thing that I always cited, I don't know if it's true, but you could correct me if I'm wrong. So those plugins,
Sure.
They're running on your server. So they're taking up memory, processing power. Is that accurate? And I was thinking you don't want to do that. You want your web server to work on serving the website.
Yeah, so a lot of them do that. The one that's the worst for that is Smush. That one's a really popular one that is free, and it definitely runs it on your server and will slow down your site while it's running. Imagify, for example, I know that they send it off to their server and then they send it back. So it's not going to slow down your server itself, but if it's during a heavy traffic time, the sending of it might have some effect. But that's generally one of the best ones to do is like Imagify, because it does do it off your site.
Okay. And then it would just be like someone loading the image, like it just pulls the image and then it'll send it back. So
right.
I wonder, do they have a setting where you could, do it during like a maintenance time frame, like Saturday night at 2 a.m. or something like that? That'd be pretty cool.
I think by default, it just does it when you upload it.
Okay. Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. So we're talking images. We already talked about reducing plugins. What are some other things that help with site speed?
You need to look at what scripts are being ran. So like lots of things run JavaScripts. Like if you're running ads on your site, so the ad companies will have all kinds of scripts that will run to load the different, dynamic ads and things like that. And then if you look at many sites with like the mobile menu, so like, your full site has the menu bar across the top, but then when it goes to mobile, it switches down and you just get the hamburger button. Well, that click of the hamburger button to display the whole menu, a lot of times we'll be running JavaScript. So just like looking at all the different scripts that are running. So if you run any of the speed testers like web page test or GTmetrix, and then you switch to the waterfall tab, it will show every single thing that is loading. So you can look at, okay, here's the big images, here's the scripts. And so you can see if those scripts are ones that you actually need. And then also in the optimization / caching plugins like WP Rocket, for example, you can go and you can say, defer the scripts to load at the bottom, or only load the scripts once I've clicked on the page or scrolled down. That can break things though, because some parts of your site might need those scripts to run. So what you do is you run your site without any of those types of optimizations on, see how it looks, look what scripts are running in like GTmetrix and make a list of them. And then once you turn it on, if say your mobile menu stops working after you turned on the optimization to defer the JavaScript, you can go and be like, oh, I saw a list, I had my list of scripts. This one probably is the menu, because it could be like menu.js, or a lot of them run in jQuery. And then so you just go into the like WP Rocket settings and you say exclude jQuery.js or exclude menu.js. And then That way it will load it normally, and then it will just defer all the other scripts.
Okay, cool. Anything else with site speed?
Those are the big things. I think if you go like any deeper, it gets in the realm where you kind of need to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to really start breaking your site.
Okay, great. One follow-up tying into plugins and whether or not we have an option to take that functionality and actually like code it. Maybe it's really simple and you don't need a plugin to do it. How can someone do that if they don't know how to code? Like, who do they turn to even try and figure out if this is possible?
Well, I have a service that does that type of work. But outside of that, if you just take into Google like what the function is and do a search, a lot of times you'll find like forums that will have people talking about that functionality. And like if it's something specific for a theme even, I know like I see like in Cadence support forum, they have or Generate Press, they'll have, someone will be like, hey, I need this functionality. And then the developer will put a script that will say, hey, put this in your functions file, and it will do that. So that's one way that you can find a lot of those quick things. But do caution, if you don't know, like you said, coding, make sure that it's like the developer of the plugin that is, or developer of the theme or something like that, that is making the recommendation and not just, a really unknown person, because you can, accidentally put something that will break your site or even something potentially malicious on your site.
Okay. Quick example of that too. I wanted to no index my archive pages or any sort of archive type pages. So I just found the code for it instead of using, some of the SEO plugins have that functionality, but I wanted to bypass for whatever reason. And it was simple enough to code it. I maybe had to change a couple files. I had an offsite backup. So if I destroyed the whole thing, I could just revert back. It's always dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. And I was literally, copying and pasting, couple minor tweaks, and it worked fine. And it was fast. I didn't have to mess with it again. So
right. Yeah, definitely on those backups.
Yeah. It's like it sort of gets you out of jail pretty easily. And you can just push a button, restores it, takes a couple minutes. Very straightforward. So, okay. So you started the hosting company. What are some things that set Iridium Hosting apart from, maybe like the quote big box kind of hosting companies out there?
Sure. So it really comes down to the personalization of support. So I only deal in WordPress. Like you can run other, like Joomla or Drupal or whatever on my hosting. It will work, but I do things specifically to optimize like the PHP settings, for example, for WordPress. And then when it comes to like a support request about a WordPress website, I'm not just giving you a generic answer. I'm actually, pretty knowledgeable in WordPress. So I can, be like, okay, here's what's actually going on. Here's what's going to fix it for you. Or this is being caused by a specific plugin, and I can tell them which plugin is breaking their site so they can go talk to the plugin developer and get it fixed. Not just giving, reading out of a book. I don't have a book to read out of.
Okay. Yeah. And I was going to say one of the classic things that I hate from the support, specifically what you're talking about, where they're reading from a script, they say, you know what, just turn off all the other plugins and then see which one, and then just turn it, like get rid of the offender. And I'm like, well, I need that to run the site. And the one I'm thinking of, it was like a course management software. Like it was the core piece of functionality the site had to have. you can get rid of some other stuff, but like that's the one we needed to have. So, all right. And I'm curious, do you have any specific like success stories from clients that have seen like specific improvements after moving to Iridium?
Yeah, I have a lot from budget hosting providers that once they move, whether it be their site speed increasing or their server is not shared with as many people. So that's actually another thing with Iridium is I um, limit to the number of people that can be on per server on the shared servers. And then I also do a lot on the VPS side where you get your own dedicated resources. But even on the shared servers, they I keep them to a few clients instead of having hundreds of sites. So if there's a lot less chance of the IP getting on a blacklist or something from just some random person signing up and using that to be their spam solution or whatever. Um, so definitely, I see a lot of clients that when they're moving from those type of budget providers, they do get a uplift in their search traffic. Um, and then also, when I do the migrations, when I migrate people to Iridium, I put them behind Cloudflare. Like that's just part of the thing. And so they're getting better site speed. And so that's going to improve their metrics, their security, things like that.
Okay. And with the Cloudflare, the benefit is the CDN portion of it.
Yeah, so both the firewalls for the security stuff, but then also the CDN portion of it too. Um, that really helps if you have a topic that is either national or global, because while you can have an optimized site or optimized server that will be faster without using Cloudflare, it may only be faster for your local area. So like if I have a server here in Washington State, like I can optimize it, make it super fast without having Cloudflare in the way. However, if someone over in Europe is coming to my site, it's going to be slower than if Cloudflare was in front of it. So as far as raw performance goes, you can be faster without Cloudflare because you're just going direct. But to be faster for everyone and for multiple situations, you can't beat something like Cloudflare.
And for people that are in a budget, I think Cloudflare has like some free level of service, right? Is that pretty good too? Like it's better than nothing, right?
Yeah, 90% of my clients are on the free plan. Even sites that get millions of hits a month are on the free plan and working just fine.
Okay. And with the paid plan, what extra do you get then?
So there's a couple different paid plans and like add-ons. So there are the main like upgrade gives you more security options. It gives you a couple more protections, but then also it allows you to have more rules. So if you have specific, like if you're running a membership site and you need to exclude certain pages from caching, and you want to bypass Cloudflare for having it where it will save like their progress in the course or whatever. You might need to create special rules at Cloudflare to get around the caching. Well, by default, the free plan only allows you to have 3 rules at Cloudflare. So the paid plan allows you to have more rules so you can tweak it to fit your needs.
Okay. Cool. So how do you keep up with the latest, say like WordPress updates or trends or, security issues and just stay up to date?
I follow the main WordPress announcements. Also, follow several of the big theme developers, like the Generate Press team, Cadence theme, Brainstorm Force, which does Astra. like having those people that are very well like deep in WordPress and constantly making changes, they're finding a lot of the problems and potential things to look out for. So following those is generally the best way I've found.
Actually, let me rephrase. So, do you have a specific WordPress theme that you just kind of favor? I won't make you say it's your favorite. I know you probably work with a lot of different, theme
Well,
companies.
I do actually have a favorite.
All right, what is it?
Cadence has been my favorite for the last few years. That being said, at the same level is GeneratePress. Those two are really good. Good teams behind them. They load super fast. Generally, the only reason that I prefer Cadence over GeneratePress is Cadence seems to have more of the starter themes that fit designs that my clients might want. So you can what I actually tell a lot of people to do, especially if they're just starting like a blog or a niche site, is you don't have to spend a ton of money on design. You could literally just go to Cadence and go and look at their starter templates, find one that you like the layout. You gotta look at it. The theme might be for like a pumpkin patch website. Like I saw one of my clients the other day that asked for this starter template. It was like pumpkin patch website. That's not what she was building. But if you look past the images that are there, it had the structure of what exactly she wanted her site to look like. So we were able to just load in that starter template and just change the images and the content out for her specific niche, and she was good to go. Like she didn't have to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars for design. I think that one required the Cadence Pro. So, because some of the templates are available in the free Cadence theme, which is good to go for most users. If you do happen to want one of the templates that is Pro, obviously you need the Pro, but um, you know that's a quick way to get a full site. Within a couple of hours, you can be up and going and not have an excuse of, oh well, I need my design. Just go get your logo done, and then put a starter template and start going on your site. Because I feel like so many people get hung up on getting started because they spin their wheel with like everything's got to be perfect and that type of thing, where if you just go and you get one of these pre-made templates, you can just get going right away.
And just to be clear, so Cadence does have like a free option. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, both Cadence and GeneratePress have free options.
Perfect. And then they have like, child themes or something like that. That I don't know if that's the right term, but some customization where you could like, is that the right term? Child theme?
That's not what they're calling them these days. They're calling them starter templates.
Starter templates.
Same idea. Same idea.
So starter template, and then you can kind of hone in on exactly what you need. Okay, great. Awesome. Well, I think we're coming towards the end here. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you, or something that you want to mention specifically? WordPress, hosting, site speed, anything?
No, I think we covered the basis for most people.
Awesome. Well, cool. Dustin, this has been a lot of fun. And I usually don't go too deep into the WordPress stuff. I just kind of, move on once I solve the problem. But so it was good to revisit it. Where can people find you?
So I just started using Twitter for business. So Dustin Hyle on Twitter. I'm trying to be the most helpful person in WordPress in 2023. That's like my personal goal. So reach out to me there. And then iridiumhosting.com for the hosting and the other services.
Great. And just so people know, Iridium, who's that for? Who are ideal clients for you?
Ideal clients are niche site owners, and also other small businesses generally. We have customers that are, just starting out from zero, all the way up to ones that have like 4 million page views a month. So we kind of have the range, but I focus on WordPress-based sites generally.
Perfect. All right, we'll link up to all this stuff so people can get to it really easily. Thanks a lot, Dustin. We'll talk to you soon.